What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. Welcome back to another preview video. This one is going to be for the final game of week 2 of the Six Nations 2022. This is, of course, where we check on a game of Rugby 22 in the background of the teams that are going to be playing. And then over the top, we talk about the official teams that have been announced that are going to be playing in the game, having a look through the teams, who we think is going to do well, who we think is going to do badly, and finally give a score prediction. This is the final game of week 2. This is between Italy and England. England have had a slightly updated kit in this game now, so it looks ever so slightly better for the game in the background. But without further ado, let's get this game kicked off and underway. Alrighty, BC will get us kicked off. We'll start to the left with the wind behind us, try and kick it deep. Let's see if we get it towards touch, put them under a little bit of pressure. Doesn't look like it, and they've had a relatively decent setup there. Right, so England versus Italy, or Italy versus England, I should say, as the home team is Italy, is a wild game. Normally, every time we come around to this in the Six Nations, it is normally a high point scoring, lot of running, tries opening up. We saw, was it last year or the year before, Ioane getting a superb try within like the first 5 minutes of the game, starting off real strong, really putting England on the back foot. And then we see other games where England just run over a good 40-50 points against Italy. It's always a great match to watch. There's a lot of running rugby in this one. Who should we talk about first going in? Let's start about talking about England first, because of course last week England lost their opening game against Scotland, playing in Murrayfield, which I think was slightly against the bookies' favourites. I think England were ever so slightly favourites going into that game. I called for a Scotland win. And they did manage to get it out, and England will, I think, be a little bit annoyed that they came away with a loss in that game. I think they played well for the majority of the game. Personally, I think Marcus Smith played really well, scoring all their points for them. The Scotland defence certainly struggled in a couple of areas, just dealing with just the speed of the ball that was coming from him to other players. And then, of course, we have other issues that they came up against. People like Cowan-Dickie knocking that ball into touch, getting himself carded, giving away a penalty try. Scotland played well and probably deserved the win at the end of the game, but England will probably be annoyed not to have sealed that one out when they absolutely had the chance to. So going into this game, they're going to need to change a couple of things around. I think they've got a good basis to work from. A lot of young players, a lot of very low-capped players, so they're still a team in transition a little bit, but there's certainly enough high-end players here that they'll be wanting to try and lead from the front and try and bolster for this game a little bit. So talking about the team that Eddie Jones is putting out for this one, we've had a few changes this week from the Scotland team. So starting off in this front row, we've got Ellis Genge, Jamie George and Will Stewart. So obviously a couple of changes here. Ellis Genge is also coming in as a vice-captain. There's 2 vice-captains this week for England, which is unusual. It's a little bit more of a Scotland thing to have the captain and 2 vice-captains. Yeah, I think it's probably a decent switch. I mean, Luke Cowan-Dickie will probably really annoyed at himself. I did see the tweet that he put out straight after that game just to apologise for his actions in knocking that ball out. You know, moment of seeing red, just get rid of the ball. He knew Darcy Graham was going to be putting big pressure on him. So I don't think it's a surprise that we might see Jamie George going here. Eddie Jones is not someone who sort of holds grudges against players, but certainly likes to say, you know, if you're going to do something, you're going to help us lose, we will make the switch there. I don't think it's a terrible move. Give Jamie George a shot now and just allow him to get a bit of game time, maybe get some maul tries, if possible, from the back of there. So I don't think that's a terrible move. I'm sure Luke Cowan-Dickie will want to come on in that second half at some point and just try and reinforce why he deserves to be in this England team. In terms of the lock departments, Charlie Ewell's coming in now in the number 4 shirt, and Isekwe, I'm going to keep getting this lad's name wrong. I tried to try and remember it from last week. He didn't have a terrible game. A couple of penalties here and there, a couple of drop balls, but overall I thought the England line-out was doing okay. Now Italy last week are actually doing quite well against the France line-out, so England will want to try and get that line-out sorted out 100% in this game. This will be a good game to try and test your line-out, test out the mauls, make sure it's all working for them. Of course, Noah Toje in that number 4 shirt. That's because he's in the back row this week. In the back row here we have Maro Toje, Tom Curry, who's the captain for this game, and Alex Dornbrandt coming in that number 8 shirt. So as far as I can find out, I believe Ludlam has picked up a injury, and that's why the switch has been made for Itoje to move to flanker, which he's done before. He's perfectly happy playing 4 or 6. Interesting to not pick some different players here and maybe move some players around, but you know, I don't think that's a terrible move. Keep Itoje on just to keep that line out safe. I don't think that's a terrible move. Tom Curry retaining that captaincy. I'm liking to see what he's doing as captain. I think this could be the opportunity for him to have a bit of a long captaincy, actually. We've seen him captain quite a few games now. Maybe this is where they're looking in the absence of people like Farrell. Maybe Tom Curry will begin to just become the new captain for England, which I don't think is a bad move. And finally, Dornbrandt, who I'm looking forward to see. Haven't really seen a lot from him in terms of international games. He hasn't had that many many caps. So really looking forward to see how that running game shows off that he's so good at in terms of the international stage. In terms of the halfbacks for them, Harry Randall coming in here over Ben Youngs. Now, personally, I thought Ben Youngs had a good game last week, in all honesty. A couple of people really disagreed with me at the Team of the Week video. As always happens with Team of the Week, people have different opinions. I thought Ben Youngs was doing okay. I thought he was quite a good attacking option for England. But I don't think this is a terrible move. I think Italy's, not to be mean to Italy, it's still a bit of a safer bet in the world of Six Nations in terms of trying to get a win. So I don't think this is a terrible move. Give the young lad a chance, get him on. I believe it's his first actual start as well, although he does have a couple of caps. So looking forward to see Harry Randall. And then Marcus Smith in that fly half shirt again. I thought he had a good week last week, scored all of the points for England. Had a good running game, was certainly finding good distribution between players. So I think it's a good move, keep him on. I don't imagine he'll play the full game. I imagine he'll be on for 50 minutes maybe, and then he'll probably come off. But I think overall that's a pretty good setup. And then in the centre partnership, Henry Slade as the second vice-captain in that inside centre, and Joe Marchant on that outside centre. They have really moved Joe Marchant around quite a lot. I have seen him play centre, I have seen him play wing. I think they're trying to find somewhere to utilise him. I really don't feel the centres did very well actually against Scotland. It was one of the few areas I think England will be looking to improve on this week. With players like Farrell and stuff working quite well between them, I think as a distributor he was much better. Henry Slade is struggling a little bit for me in that 12 shirt. I do much prefer him in 13 because I think he's so good at finding gaps in players on that 13, running around the outside channel and hitting a gap, whereas in 12 it's a little bit more difficult to do. Personally, I would like to see Slade move towards that 13 shirt again and actually find a more respectable 12, someone that's got a bit more experience in that 12 shirt. Maybe even try Joe Marchant in 12 just to see how that works out, because Joe Marchant seems to hit quite hard when he runs forward, but I think Henry Slade's a much more technical player. I assume he's moved to 12 to be the distributor. England don't use inside centres like Ireland do with Bundy Aki and just use them to run at full force. They tend to use them as a distributor, as a tactical kicker, so I assume that's why he's in 12, but personally for me I do prefer Slade at 13. And then finally in the back three, Noel moves on to the left wing, which is nice to see. He's waited a long time to get back into this England starting team. It's nice to see him move on there. Max Malins will be retaining that 14 shirt, and Freddie Stewart still in that fullback shirt, who didn't play badly against Scotland. I think the wet ball certainly got to him a little bit. Scotland playing a very good kicking game. There was a lot of good box kicks, actually just getting outside the England 22. Couldn't call the mark, put him under big pressure. Certainly saw the cracks beginning to show in Freddie Stewart's game, but I would assume against Italy he will be looking to greatly improve his running game for this one. There wasn't a lot of counter-attacking from him, which is one thing I know about Freddie Stewart, is actually his counter-running is so good. He's so good in catching the ball in the air and the counter-run. We really didn't get to see that against Scotland. Instead, he was just kicking it back to them. So I do hope that opens up a little bit in this game. But as a Walter 15, this is a good England team, to be fair. I really thought they might do quite a lot of changes here just to get some more people on. It's all, what's this, sort of like 4, 5, 6 changes here, so there's been quite a few changes, but they're making changes of players that play well together anyway. Marcus Smith, Dornbrand, Randall, these lads a bit more used to playing with each other. I don't think they're terrible changes. I actually think these players will be able to do pretty well together. As we're going to move into half-time here now, we'll begin to look at some substitutions in the game. In the background, we do, of course, need to talk about the England subs. Who, I think a couple of people were quite annoyed at the England substitutions last week. A lot of people coming on, and there's been a lot of criticism around George Ford coming on and having to take Marcus Smith off. I don't really believe necessarily it was going to be George Ford's fault that they ended up losing that game, but they certainly lost a big attacking threat as soon as Smith came off. So checking out the England replacements for this week, starting off with that front row, Luke Cowan-Dickie on the bench in that hooker position, Joe Marler and Kyle Sinclair. So basically that sort of big swap up that we saw from last week, the only real difference there not being changed is Marler, as far as I'm aware. So bolster that. So that second half, I would maybe even say the replacement front row is stronger than the starting front row, in all honesty. So I assume in that second half we might see the England forwards begin to open up a little bit. In the 19 shirt, I believe it's Ollie Chesham. I'm not 100% sure of the first name. The name I have written down here is just an O, Chesham, who I believe is going to be making his debut this week. Don't know a lot about him. Looking forward to watching him a little bit more. And then in that 20 shirt, Sam Simmons, who just is just not quite getting going in that international shirt for me. Certainly playing fine and having some good runs. It's taken a couple of tacklers to get him down, but his name became quite blown up when it got around to the Lions, and I think a lot of people have spent a lot of time watching him. He's been playing really well at club level over the last year. I think people have started to work out how to counter him a little bit in the international team, so I don't think putting him on in that second half is going to be a bad move. Actually, when the Italian players are getting a little bit tired, that fatigue's kicking in, Put him on then, allow him to have some running play. I think there could be the opportunity for some big plays from him. Replacement scrum half is going to go to Ben Youngs. Yeah, I think it's a good move having Harry Randall to start and then put Ben Youngs on just to finish out the game when it gets towards the end. George Ford, the replacement fly half. You know, as was last week, I imagine Marcus Smith will probably spend less time on the field this week than he did last week. Get George Ford on just to get that confidence up. You can't just be relying on one fly half for the whole tournament just in case of injuries. I think it'd be worth putting George Ford on around that 50-minute mark, especially if you've already got the bonus point tries that I'm sure England will be looking for. And then the final substitution, Elliot Daly going in there, which is actually really good coverage now with his experience of winger, fullback and centre performance now. So really hard to judge where he will go to. Really throws the Italian coaches off of where to try and defend once he comes on. Who knows what he'll do. So I don't think that's a bad move, and I think that's quite a decent substitution bench. I actually think there's a lot of stronger players on the bench than starting. So England going into this absolutely full force. So we of course need to talk about the Italian team, who I don't think had a bad game against France. I know it's hard to look at. People look at the results and they don't really seem to critically look at the game and see how it worked out. The first half for Italy I thought was really good. France certainly put on the back foot a lot of times. The Italian line-out was disrupting quite a few, which was really nice. Got themselves a try, which was actually really well worked. So, you know, this is what we want to be seeing from Italy. Even if they're going to keep losing games, it doesn't matter as long as you're going to keep improving and keep getting those more important scores and stuff. I really don't mind. I'm looking forward to see what they build on, especially getting towards the World Cup now. I'm more than happy for them to keep losing games as long as we're seeing more tries, more points being scored, better set plays, better work at the line-outs, better work at the scrums. That's all I want to be seeing from them. So starting off in this front row, we've got Fischetti, Lucchesi and Casarelli. So again, a bit of a power front row. I assume these lads will be able to do okay. Lucchesi actually played pretty well last week. So looking forward to seeing him again. The England scrum, obviously a big area for them. I don't see England getting the ball out of the scrum quickly by any means. I assume they're going to want to try and play for those penalties. Be interested to see how this front row holds up. In the lock department, Cannone and Ruzza, who played brilliantly last week, got into my team of the week. Thought he was absolutely brilliant. Federico Ruzza really involved in disrupting the French line-out as well as great running play and really played a big hand in scoring that try for them, which was really nice to see. In the back row, we've got Bram, Stein, Lamaro and Halafini, who, again, I thought was actually doing pretty well, in all honesty, and especially in terms of getting turnovers and stuff. He was pretty on it in terms of the breakdown, which is nice to see. Number 8s in a breakdown is not really that much of a big thing. Maybe Matt Ferguson's the biggest sort of number 8 I would think of that gets involved in terms of the breakdown. But nice to see Halafini getting over there for some turnovers as well. Hopefully he can do more in this game. In the halfback partnership, Stephen Varney and Garbisi still retaining their 9 and 10 shirts. Yeah, not a great deal to talk about. Again, Garbisi with his general kicking is pretty good. Stephen Varney got wrapped up a couple of times in that France game. He's just so eager. He's just a young lad. He's just very eager to get going, especially once you get past that 50-minute marker when we know the Italian team tend to get a little bit fatigued. I think he can be a little bit overzealous in just trying to get the speed of the ball going so quickly when a lot of the players are getting tired. I think he needs to just work a little bit more on working out what his players are actually able to perform around him rather than how quick he can go, and I think he might gel a little bit better with some of his forwards. In the centre partnership, Zanon and Brex will still be retaining that 12-13, so, you know, game experience now. A lot of this team is going to be the same team we saw last week against France. I don't think that's a bad move. You've got to have game time together. You've got to have that team chemistry working together. I think that's perfectly good. And then that back three, Ioane, Mori and Padovani. Again, Padovani was nearly there in my team of the week last week. In terms of fullback, thought he did pretty well against France. I just leant slightly more towards Jaminet, but I think that this back three has relatively decent coverage. We're not going to be seeing Melancello, unfortunately, this week. Not sure if there was an injury or anything. He's not on the bench either. Nice to see him getting over for try. Youngest try scorer ever, I believe, now in the Six Nations. That's a nice record for him to hold. But I did feel his defensive work was strained a little bit, to be honest. We certainly saw Villiers getting over for a lot of tries on his wing, which he didn't really even feel contested for. So I don't think that's a bad move, putting Federico Mori on. They'll know England like to use the backs a lot, so maybe a slightly better defensive presence. And as we are getting slowly towards the end of the game, of course, we need to look at the Italian bench. Starting off, front row replacements. Fiver, Traore and Pasquale. Now, Traore's a big boy. England are going to be putting on some big forwards in that second half. I think you need big forwards as well yourself, just to try and get that pack weight up a little bit, especially in terms of scrums. England are going to be looking for that scrum in that second half, I think, trying to get some penalties over. Replacement forwards as well in here. We've got David Sisi and Negri going to be in there. Giovanni Pettinelli, Fusco, and Marin. Now, a couple of these backs are lesser known to me. There's certainly a few caps between them. Fusco, for instance. There's a couple of caps in there, but it's by no means the strongest bench I imagine Italy have. I would say out of the two benches, I'm leaning towards England in terms of having the stronger bench overall. So, although it may be a relatively even first half, potentially, we might see quite similar to what we saw in Italy-France. I've got a feeling that second half could be where it begins to go a little bit wrong for them. So in terms of the score prediction, what do we think for this one? I had a little look at a couple of interviews from Eddie Jones, and he's basically said outright, we're going to go for Italy from minute one. We're going to absolutely try and smash through and get some tries. So you've got to believe England will want the scores, especially with losing that first game last week. They'll want the bonus point this week. They're going to be going for the tries. They're going to use the forwards in that first half, then just let the backs explode in that second half, I imagine, once fatigue begins to kick in. So I'm going to lean towards England for this one, and I'm going to say England to win by, I'm going to say 28. That might sound like quite a lot. I've got a feeling they're going to aim to get a try very early in that first half. Maybe within the first 5-10 minutes, they're going to use that maul to try and get over. We're going to do the general England setup we see. And then I think it might be more even towards the end of the first half. However, I think in that second half, with the bench that England are putting on, they're absolutely going to be going for just dominating in terms of the forward pack. That leads to penalties. That leads to mauling tries. So that's what I'm going to go for, guys. But of course, I am but one man on the internet talking nonsense about rugby. So make sure you do drop down in the comments who you think's going to win, what you think the score difference will be, who you think's going to score tries, all that super fun stuff. If you enjoyed today, make sure to drop this video a like, and to keep up to date with all of the preview videos, along with other different Six Nations content that I want to be putting out on the channel, make sure that you subscribe to the channel just to keep up to date with all the latest videos as they come out. I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. I will see you next time. Bye bye.